We're here today with Michael Hernandez from the Hot Company. Michael's going to demonstrate the ultra-low range total residual chlorine method on the DR2800. This is method 1014. Michael?
Thank you, Steve. We're going to start off with doing the procedure for creating the reagent blank. The first step on that procedure is to collect 100 mils of DI water in a 250 ml beaker. The next step is to collect 1 mil of blanking reagent and placing that into the 250 ml beaker. Then swirl to mix and create a 5-minute timer for that reaction period to occur. So I have that going on the spectrophotometer. While that timer's going, I'd like to talk about prepping your glassware. You'd like to use a dedicated glassware for this procedure. You'd like to keep it clean and free of other contaminants or other analytes. Once you get it, you'd like to pre-soak it in a bleach solution to rid the glassware of any chemical or chlorine demand. So as you're running through the procedures, you're not losing any of the chlorine to the glassware itself. Once you do that, rinsing it with bleach several times, soaking it, rinse it several times with DI water, and then use that as your glassware for this procedure. Okay, the next step on it, as we're waiting for the timer to go, we're going to break open the buffer solution. It's going to be over here. So we opened an ampule of the ultra-low range chlorine buffer. Going to get another pipette tip. Please use different tips for each of these pipettes that you're running. Now we're going to grab 1 mil and place this into the graduated cylinder. The next step is going to be taking the DPD chlorine indicator again, new pipette tip. Collect 1 mil. Add that to your graduated cylinder. We have 2 minutes left on the reaction time. And once that beeps and there was adequate time for the reagent blank to mix within the beaker, we're going to pour 50 mils from the beaker into the graduated cylinder for mixing. So the purpose of doing this reagent blank is just to determine what kind of chlorine residual you have within your chemistries. And that's going to be accounted for. And after this procedure, we're going to enter that reagent blank into the DR2800 so it accounts for it as we're testing our sample. So there's our beeper, our timer alert. So we have 50 mils in here. Now we're starting the next timer, which is the 3-minute timer that you'll use during the regular procedure. So you cap that, invert for mixing. Now as this timer's going, you take the remainder of the blanked DI water and pour that through your pour-through cell. Okay. Then once the flow stops, we will hit 0. And the flow has stopped. Now we have a 0 within the spectrophotometer. We've got a minute and a half left on the reaction time. And then once the timer's up, we will be pouring the contents of the graduated cylinder into the pour-through cell, and then we will hit read, which will give us our reagent blank, and then we'll enter that within our spectrophotometer and proceed through the testing of the sample. Utilize this time, I'll insert the membrane filter at this time into the Oroflow assembly. We now have that prepped for our sample. Now the timer's gone, so we'll pour the reagent blank solution through the pour-through cell. Okay, the flow has stopped. We'll hit read. And we have a value of 3 micrograms per liter. And just make sure that that is entered within the spectrophotometer. Reagent blank on, value to 3. And now that's entered. So now we'll proceed through testing sample. So this will be our effluent or grabbing a sample. It's very important that you collect the sample properly, rinse at least 3 times as you're gathering your sample. Be as representative as possible. Since we already used this glassware, I want to be sure I rinse this one out as well. Okay. The first step is getting your filter on, which we did while we were doing the reagent blank, and that timer was going. Okay. Now we're getting another ampule for the buffer solution. Okay, getting a new pipette tip. Then we're going to take 1 ml. Place it into the graduated cylinder. Discard that tip. Place a tip with a new one. And get a DPD indicator. That one fell, so we'll get another one. Again, a little more carefully. Place that into the mixing graduated cylinder. Now we're going to pour our sample into our overflow assembly. Place the plunger on top to filter out your sample. Get a filtered sample. Now we're going to pour this into the pour-through cell for our 0. Again, we'll wait for the flow to stop before we hit 0. So now we have a 0. We'll take the remainder of our sample. get another filtered portion of our sample. And we will pour this to the 50 ml mark within our graduated cylinder. Now cap and invert. Begin the timer. Again, the general 3-minute timer for this portion. And then once that timer times down, we'll pour the filtered sample from the graduated cylinder through the pour-through cell and hit read. And the value that we get with the reagent blank on will have the reagent blank accounted for within that value. Then once this procedure is done, it's very important to maintain the pour-through cell keep it very clean. There's a sulfuric acid solution that can be used to clean it either daily or weekly with as needed, depending on the cleanliness of your effluent. It's very important to rinse the pour-through cell after every test very well with DI water. Use at least 150 mils to make sure that it's flushed out and you're not leaving any residual reagents or analytes within your system. And there's our beep from our timer. And the flow has stopped, so we'll hit read. And we got a value of 12 micrograms per liter. And that is the method 1014 for ultra low range chlorine residual.
Thank you, Michael.